There we
Blinking.
go. Okay. Good morning, everybody. I'm Alan Meadam. I'm the Technology Director for the North Shore School District and Board President for Technology. Thanks for getting up and coming in this morning. I really appreciate it. I hope you guys are having a good conference so far. If not, please let me know, or any of the board members got the black badges. Joe Morlock, Joe's next president, and I have gold badges. Anyways, because we can't get differentiated enough, I guess. So this morning's session, Incident Command System for School Districts. It's a session that I think I've seen you present this before and talk about it before. I find it very interesting. Presenting for us today is, I would say Steve, because that's all we ever call Steve. Steve at North Shore. Steve's our Unix Systems Administrator and so much more in North Shore School District. Does a ton of great work for us, solves problems, and in crisis kinds of situations is a great guide for keeping a level head and working us through problems. So I'm really looking forward to the session today, and I hope you guys get a lot out of it. Steve?
Okay. So first thing, how many people here are first responders? 1, 2, 3. So you guys know about this already, right? Okay, cool. All right. So not everybody. Over the next 90 minutes or so, I'm going to tell you about a system that's been around since the 1970s, and it's used by first responders to make sure that when they respond to an incident, they can actually do it correctly and not have any major problems. Please feel free to ask questions as we go through this. Like Alan has said, I've been a system admin for a very long time, been at North Shore since 2003. King County Search and Rescue is the largest volunteer search and rescue organization in the U.S. We have about 200 members. We've been around since the early 1950s, and that's where I got my first responder training. So, Incident Command System, I'll use the acronym ICS, but the idea here is to improve your ability to respond to an incident, both by doing some pre-planning and also to work with other groups. And this can be anything from a school lockdown type incident, computer crash, or you're planning an event, like the event today. The people who planned the event today had to go through all the roles I'm going to talk about. And by the end of this, I hope that you'll have at least a basic idea of what Incident Command System is all about. We'll give you some links to go to. There's a couple of good online courses you can take, sponsored by FEMA. So the agenda is why, the key concepts, features and principles. Because this is a bureaucracy type of thing, they have a lot of 14 of this and 6 of this and things like that. It does actually mean something. It's not just total writing you want to ignore, because when they say that, you do need all these roles or all these functions to be successful. Okay. Why? It gives you a consistent process. No matter what the incident, no matter what the event is, it gives you a consistent process and a model. That's the really key portion. When you go into an event like sponsoring a conference or an incident like your systems fail or you have a school lockdown incident, it says you need to have somebody to talk to the press. You need to have somebody to deal with logistics. You need to have somebody to fill all these various roles. If you don't fill those roles, you're going to have a problem. So when you go into an incident, you can look at this and say, do I have all my roles filled? If I don't, I need to find somebody to do that, right? It gives you a common language between yourself and other groups. So let's suppose you have a school lockdown incident, right? The cops are going to show up, the fire people show up, you got a fire or something. They all know this. If you use this language, they're going to understand what's going on immediately. You can size the incident, and we'll talk about this a little bit, because they all speak this. And then it's been tried and refined for over 40 years, probably close to 50 years now. It was developed in the 1970s. In the 1970s, California had some horrendous wildfires. All the fire departments went out to fight it, and they all spoke different languages, they used different terminology, and a whole bunch of people died. They figured this was not a good thing. It was a bad thing. So California, the state of California, then passed some regulation saying everybody has to use the same terminology, the same language. What is a commander? What is a section chief? What does that mean? We're going to do everything the same. In the 1980s, it became part of the National Incident Management System. 2003, Those two directives are Homeland Security Presidential Directive number 5 and Presidential Policy Directive. This is, from the president on down, this is how the U.S. responds to incidents right now. Homeland Security, everybody, they use this system. And it's currently used around the world. It is recommended by the UN. So it's kind of grown up. It's common. You can take me or any of the first responders in this room, and if something really bad happens, like Hurricane Katrina, we can get dropped into there and we can immediately be productive because we know the language that everybody else is speaking down there. We know what they're going to do. We know what our role is. We can participate right from the get-go. Some of the characteristics, it's flexible. You can use it for a one-person incident. My server crashed. I got to go fix it. Who do I notify? Things like that. All the way up to an incident like Hurricane Katrina, where you literally have thousands and thousands of people involved. That is really slick. It's interchangeable. Doesn't matter what organization you're in, this thing will work. A manageable span of control. So there's a nice little rule of thumb, we'll talk more about it, that says basically if you're a manager and you have more than 7 people reporting to you, you got a problem. If you have less than 3, you have another problem. You shouldn't be a manager. The ideal is 5. So this is a really good rule of thumb. People have been working on this rule of thumb for over 40 years. It works. So if you're in your school district and you notice somebody has more than 7 people reporting to them, you may want to increase your management staff. If they have less than 3, they're individual contributors, well, then you may want to reduce your management staff. All the important functions. This idea of it being ephemeral is really, really important. When you have a school lockdown function or something, often the principal is not the best person to run the incident. The principal is often the best person to be your PR liaison with your parents and things. So your incident commander is not necessarily the person that runs the organization. In fact, a lot of times they are not that person. That's not the best fit. So an incident command appears, like this conference, for example. All the people involved in this conference, they work on the conference, and then they disappear and go back to their regular jobs. And then when that happens again, they work on it again, and this whole organization appears and disappears and shrinks and grows, right? It's ephemeral. Okay, some of the concepts. Incidents are unplanned things. Service outages, power outages, fire at a school, lockdown at a school, right? Events are planned things. I'm doing a system upgrade or patch. I can plan it to happen at a certain time. A hardware HVAC installation, right? A conference like this, it's a planned thing. That's the technical description of them. Some sort of incidences. These are some of the questions you need to ask and that the system will take you through, right? If I have a data center down, when will the various systems be backed up? What systems will come up first? Who do we need to notify? How often? How to keep the actual people doing the work free to actually do the work so they aren't answering questions all the time, right? What other things do you guys think of that you might want to throw on this list? Anything? What?
Who's going to be affected by the...
Who's going to be affected by it? Yes, that's another good one. Anything else? Oh, and I will have the slides available for anybody, so you don't have to take notes. And I've actually got notes. My slides have got notes that add on to things. Yeah. An event. Who to tell, when and how often, how to market it. Who's responsible for testing the work after it got done, right? Who's responsible for doing it? When will it be done? How long will it take? Again, this is a planned incident. So from now on during my talk, incidents refer to both events and incidents. Okay. An operational period, this is a chunk of time, typically less than 24 hours, that you say, these are the goals I'm going to get done in this chunk of time. And then you can see if you were successful or not. If you're not successful, you can figure out why. So sometimes an operational period may be as short as an hour. Typically it's 8 hours, 4 to 8 hours. But you have to have an operational period is something that says this is what I'm going to get done in this period of time. Rarely is it over 24 hours. types of incidences. The system defines 5 different types of incidences. And again, I'm going to go through these because if you talk to a fire or police and you say, I have a type 3 incident, they will know what you mean. They will know exactly what's going on. So anyway, type 5 is the most common. This is your system down. One to 6 people. It might be a few hours to 1 operational period, whatever that's defined to be. You don't need anything written. It can all be oral. You can just tell people what's going on, right? Next one is up to 20 people. You might have some of these other positions. I'll talk about this in a little bit. Might be there. You might need a strike team or a task force. I'll define that later. It's typically 1 operational period. Nothing written. In my search and rescue thing, this is what we would call a type 5 is typically what we call our escort service. Somebody goes up to the top of the mountain without the flashlight and can't get down the hill. So we send 2 people up and bring them down with a flight. Okay, that's a type 5. A type 4 is somebody goes up to the top of the mountain and they broke a leg or something. And we send a bunch of people up and a helicopter comes in and takes them off. Right? The next one, type 3, is somebody goes up to the mountain, it's cloudy, so the helicopter can't come, and it's going to take us about 40 or 50 people to get the person down, because now we're carrying them down in a litter. And just so you know a little bit, if you break your leg on a mountain and they don't get the helicopter up there, you go up the hill at 2 miles an hour, you're coming down at anywhere between a quarter to a half a mile an hour. And you think about that trail, the people who carry the litter are walking beside the trail, so remember those nice steep hills? So I'm either carrying the litter like this if I'm downhill, or I'm carrying the litter like this if I'm uphill. It takes a long time to bring somebody down. So multiple operational periods, you will have a written plan. You know, you're going to be there for 24 hours or longer going through this process.
Part of the plan might be don't break your leg on a mountain.
That would be very nice. Type 2 incidences. These are things like, I don't know how many people here were up in Washington and they knew about the Oso landslide. Killed lots and lots of people. Yeah, that's a type 2 incident. We get people from all over the, we get FEMA gets involved, all kinds of people get involved. Type 1, this is Hurricane Katrina. Lots and lots of people get involved. And another little side note, FEMA is actually really, really incredible. At the Oso incident, they basically showed up with these big monster 18-wheeler trailers and set up an entire town. Everything in an entire town. Everything you can possibly think of. Cell phone towers, radio, logistics, tents, plumbing, everything just appeared out of nowhere. It's really amazing what those guys can do. Okay. I'm going to use this as an incident for a lot of examples throughout it. So on VMware, if you have a VMware cluster and you actually set the VMware host to use jumbo frames, which is a very large packet, and your SAN, where it's talking to, does not use that, VMware will decide anywhere between 2 to 3 weeks later to shut down everything arbitrarily. It just says all my data storage goes offline. This actually happened to me at 2 a.m. on a Friday, and it was quite a wonderful experience to go through that. Anyway, we basically got everything back up. We had about 250 affected virtual machines. We had to restore 10 of them from backup. So what type of incident is this? There was about 10 to 12 people involved. Yeah, it'd be like a type 3 to 4. Yeah, I mean, it's not hard categories. We had multiple days. That makes it more of a type 3. We didn't quite have all, 20 people involved, so it'd be in there somewhere. Okay.
So type 1?
No. Type 3 or 4.
That's what
Yeah. A type 1 would be lots and lots of people. So some of the primary issues it addresses, we'll go through each of these. Communications, conflicting codes and terminology, conflicting systems. I may use a radio on one frequency, you may use it on another, right? Unclear objectives. The human language is an incredibly expressive way of communicating and incredibly gray, right? Oh, I'm missing something. Oh, let's go back one. All right. Oh, we'll get to that later. Accountability issues. Who is actually in command? So on the VMware incident, it goes down, and I've got 5 different people telling me what has to come up first, right? Not 1, but 5. It'd take a while. There was definitely an unclear chain of command there for a while.
That would relate back to what are your objectives. If you don't
Yeah.
know who's in charge, it's 4 different people. They've all got their own objectives on what we're actually
Yep.
trying to accomplish.
Yeah. Too many people reporting to one person. You get freelancers, which they're wonderful people. They want to do good, but they're causing more problems than what they're worth. So you really got to have that chain of command. So who's responsible for what? Okay. Information issues. What's going on? What actually broke? Where did it break, right? What resources are needed to fix it? Who do we talk to in other groups? Systems go down. Is it a database issue or is it a computer issue? What information do people need to fix it? When are we finally totally, utterly up and running? What systems didn't quite get checked correctly, right? So with the VMware incident, it took us about 2 hours to actually track down the problem. You know, we know all our services were offline. We didn't know why. And at 2 a.m. in the morning, I'm not thinking very clearly. So it definitely took me to about 4 or 5 before I figured out, okay, now I understand where my problem is. I don't know how to fix it yet, but at least I understand where it is. And then from there, we can work on and keep working on it, right? Planning issues. We often get this thing, it's broke, I want it fixed now. It's causing all my teachers to not do things. And sometimes we can't fix it now, or sometimes the fix will take a while. Sometimes it's hard to explain that to people. There's a good rule of thumb, is that when a person is very emotional, it doesn't make any sense to explain things to them. It's not going to stick, it's not going to stay in their head. You have to take care of the emotional content that they're dealing with first, then you can start to talk about, okay, it is going to take 5 hours to get this thing fixed. But until you deal with their emotional side, forget about telling them it's going to take 5 hours, or 6 hours, or 6 days, or whatever. We often forget things in the heat of the moment. So it's really good to step back a little bit, take some time, think about what you're doing, and then make a decision. Scalability. This does work well for all different types of incidents. So for example, on the VMware incident, from 2 to roughly 6 or 7 in the morning, it was me. I was the only guy there. Then all of a sudden we had more system admins. I had my tech assistants come in. My boss came in, scaled up. By Saturday evening, it was back down to me again. So that we kind of grow and we could shrink with no problems. Okay, so what are some of the characteristics of ICS? You guys remember those at all? Yes, I will be asking you questions. I know it is 9 o'clock in the morning or something like this. This is not what you expected. It's flexible. It can span all different types of situations, right? You can use it for incidences or events like planning this conference. Planning your family gathering that happens once every 5 years, right? It's ephemeral. The people involved in it are there for the incident or the event, and then they go off in their own sweet way and do something else. It's well tested. It's been around for a long time. There's different types of incidences. Incidences for events. Can anybody answer that one?
Unplanned versus planned.
Unplanned versus planned. There we go. How many incident types are there? 5. There we go. All right. And what are some of the issues that ICS addresses? Who's in charge? Communication, accountability, right? Reliable information, lack of planning, and scalability. So what happens is when you go online and you do some of their little quizzes and things, these are the types of questions they ask. It's more about, did you actually read and kind of comprehend the material? Okay, this is the slide that I was warning you about. They got 6 different categories and 14 different features and principles. And we're going to go through those. You don't have to remember them all. But the thing is, you need to have all of these things if you're going to have a successful event without having something fall through the cracks, or you really respond to that incident. So common terminology. Again, we've talked about this a little bit. It really makes a big difference. Example, if I mention ASP, I can be application service provider or an active server page. Which one do I mean? If I mention SFTP, there's 3 different things it means. So when you use an acronym, you got to be really careful that the person understands what it means. In general, you don't want to use them. There are some acronyms used within ICS, but in general, we try not to use those. Command, who is in charge? It's defined as the act of directing, ordering, or controlling. There's only one commander. At any one time, there's always only one commander. Period. That's one of the golden rules. You can pass command to somebody else, but always one commander at a time. So with the VMware incident, I started out being the commander. Then once my boss came in, he took over the IC role and a couple other roles, so I could just focus on getting things back up. On Saturday, when things were pretty much back up, he passed it back to me and I could finish up. They have full responsibility and authority for it, including delegation. Does not mean do everything yourself, it means delegate things. As soon as the work gets to be too much, you have somebody else fill that role, and they take over that role and they delegate it. You delegate it to them. Transfer command. This is really, really important. When you transfer command, you have to let the person you're transferring to know what you've done, how you've done it, what problems you ran into, and then you transfer it to them and you let everybody else know, hey, he's the boss now, I'm not. The best example I can give you of this is when I had a problem with Exchange server. I was a young system admin, and we had even a guy working for me that was even younger, and we did incremental backups for about 1.5 years, and then the server crashed. You ever try to restore about 450 incremental backups to Exchange? Does not work. However, Microsoft literally has the best ad hoc support in the world. If you call up their Enterprise Exchange or Enterprise Windows support, you pay them a fixed fee. Back then it was $200, I'm sure it's gone up, and you say, fix it. They then stay on the line until they fix it. 3 days. We were on the line for 3 days straight. And when they went from one data center to another around the world, one call center to the world, they would do a transfer command. And it was fascinating to watch the guy in Texas transfer command to the guy over in Ireland, who would then go to Singapore and then back to Texas. But 3 days, they got us up and working, and $200. Literally the best ad hoc support you will ever get. But their transfer command processes were very clear. They did it really well. So you might have to, if the situation changes in complexity, you might want to transfer command to somebody with more experience. Operational period ends, you need to rest, right? Includes some sort of a briefing. And again, you let everybody else know that, hey, I'm not in command, somebody else has taken over. Any questions on this? Yeah.
Can we go back to the earlier slide just before that, as far as the command?
Yeah.
One of the things, I don't know, it seems to me that sometimes the person that is in command, wants to be in command, wants to make all the decisions, and how do you get that, how do you differentiate between the person that just wants to be in charge versus the one that's actually in the
Very good question.
commander taking care of the situation?
Yes, very good question. So it has to be done on a performance basis. So for example, in search and rescue, where I learned my stuff, we are completely performance based. By that I mean I'm over 50. I have literally gone on missions where I am taking command orders from a 17-year-old who has gone on more missions than I have, She was much more experienced. She was what they call a field leader or an operation leaders in training. I'm only a team leader. I'm a peon compared to her skill level. So it was totally performance-based. Now, in a political organization, this is where I say this is an ephemeral thing. It's got no relationship to what your political organization is. And you really got to make that clear to people. I don't care if you're a director. I don't care if you're the superintendent. If you make me the IC, I'm the IC. You do what I tell you to. And if they can't accept that, you're going to have a problem, right? And the only reason I'd be the IC is that I would have more experience in doing that than they would. And hopefully they'll be able to understand that. You know, again, personally, I think superintendents and principals would be really good in the PR role. They're already doing that. They know the teachers. They know the staff. They already have some contacts with the community. That's a much better role for them than actually trying to be the IC on some school lockdown or something like that. That's just my personal opinion.
It would seem that would be a great reason why you do this. You establish these roles before,
Yeah.
and not in the middle of it. In the middle of it, people,
Yeah.
going back to your earlier slide, they're not going to be thinking straight.
Right. You have to do this beforehand. And we'll talk a little bit about that in just a few minutes. Any other questions? Nope.
Yeah, in the IT world, I've always had a difficult time translating ICS into something that's applicable. For example, command implies a lot of knowledge about, systems, and in the IT arena, you have a large sweeping issue, and you're making decisions, and you have a superintendent that's going to walk in. That's not going to be a good fit for a commander. So commanders also have to have an understanding of the scope of and nature of the problem, not just the
Yes.
fact that they have an understanding of the ICS system.
Right. And there's two things going on. They have to have that understanding, and they have to have trust that they can say, okay, you're the operations guy, you just figure it out. So in an IT environment, the operations chief, and we'll talk about more of that a little bit later, would be probably an IT person, because they understand how that works. But then the person who's running the whole incident, like, all my systems are down, I got to notify all the principals and stuff, that could actually be somebody else. They just have to have trust that the operations person is doing the best they possibly can and is letting them know, yeah, it's going to be a day. It's going to be, this is the system that we're going to get up first, and so on.
Yeah, I was just gonna follow up
Yeah.
on that. What point do you get, the first thing when you have an incident is, when is everything gonna be up? When is everything gonna be
Right.
up? So at what point do you, everything's different, obviously, incidents happen. At what point can you get to know yourself, hey, this is gonna be up in 5 hours?
Well, when you start getting some hard data back from your systems, then you can do it. So, for example, in the VMware incident, from 2 a.m. to probably close to noon the next day, we didn't know. We had a bunch of systems up by 10, the most critical ones. But there were other systems that, they aren't critical. We don't know when we'll get to them. And it pretty much took us a whole week to get everything back up, because we'd find systems that aren't used very often. I don't know about you, but we've got systems that are used once a week or once a month or something. And okay, I forgot about that one. Add that to my checklist. But you kind of have to play that by ear. As soon as you got the data and it's verified data, it's reliable data, then you can start passing it on to other people. Until then, you have to just let them know. We don't know yet. That's a perfectly valid answer. It's better to do that. It's better, like under promise and over deliver type of thing. That's a lot better than actually telling people, yeah, I'm going to have it up in 2 hours, and oh, I missed that date. That's really bad.
And that really is the truth too. I mean, because I'm as bad as anybody for when something goes Aspen ski. When are we going to be back up? When's things going to be stable? And because I'm talking to the superintendent or I'm talking to some principals, and establishing that trust on the data that we are going to give them, that they can believe it, is really important for moving forward. So when I do have to tell the superintendent, we don't know yet, they then know. By establishing the trust, they know that when I do know, I'm going to tell you, but believe me when I tell you right now, I don't know, but we're figuring it out. After you go through that process a couple of times and you over-deliver, people, they will trust you on it. Worst thing in the world, though, is that we say, should be up by noon, and I just totally pull the moon out of my hat. I mean, that makes the superintendent feel better for like that long. And then at 12:01, when it's not back up, everything is shot.
Yeah, and that trust is really, really important. Okay, so chain of command is a term they use, and most of these things at the top are terms that are specific. So if you go to a fire person and you talk chain of command, this is what they're thinking. That is the, I guess you can call it a legal definition in ICS, right? It's the view from the top down, an orderly line of authority. So if I say something has to happen to the people below me, and it will happen all the way down the chain of command, right? It allows the incident commander to control the response. So one of the implications is requests for more resources and things have to go up and down the hierarchy, not side to side. You can transfer information side to side, but a formal request saying, hey, I need more resources, I need this, needs to go up and down. Can anybody tell me why that's so important? Yeah.
The person above you has to be able to know what's going on and make the decisions for the other.
That's one aspect. There's one other aspect. That's why that's really important. Yeah. The person above you will probably have knowledge that you won't have, right? So if I'm a team leader in search and rescue and I go talk, I say, oh, I need more litter help or I need something, and I'm just talking to other team leaders, and the person above me might say, hey, you know, we just have another incident happen over here. We can't free that up right now. This incident is more important. You guys just need to get put on hold. I would have never known that if I did not go up and down the chain of command. They have a higher level view of what's going on in the incident, and they can better allocate resources optimized for the entire incident rather than get locally optimized for that little bit of it. So number one, to let them know what's going on. Number two is to make sure they can best optimize the resources for the incident. Again, you still share information across the hierarchy, but all requests have to go up and down.
Is that usually the person answering to like the newscaster?
What?
Is that usually the person that's getting questioned by the media?
No, it could be. In a bigger incident, you have some special person who does that. In search and rescue, we never talk to the media. The sheriff gets to do that. All the media requests have to go through the sheriff's office. They have a whole person that does that full time. If a media comes up to me on a mission or even off a mission, the first thing I say is go talk to the sheriff. I just don't even bother with that. It's too easy for me to get in trouble. So with the data center outage, the VMware data center outage, I had multiple people telling me what they wanted done first. Like, you know, the student record folks said, I got to get those systems up. I can't take attendance and all this other stuff. But they didn't have a really big picture. Imagine your whole data center's down. What would be the first systems you'd bring up? Phones, possibly, yeah. Even before that, what's the first thing you need to have up and running on your network before anything else can come up? Domain controllers, yeah, DNS, DHCP. Those are the first, your authentication systems. Forget about the student record systems. If those aren't there, your student record systems aren't going to do anybody any good. Nobody can log into them, right? Okay?
Well, and the other, with the attendance, and I remember when we were having those calls, sort of worst case scenario is you don't take attendance on a class for a half an hour. I mean, the building does not come down over stuff like that. I understand that it irritates every teacher in the district, but it's really not that bad.
Yeah. Okay, unity of command. This is the exact opposite of chain of command. This is the view from the bottom up. This says, me being a team member or a team leader, I only report to one supervisor. None of this two supervisor stuff. One supervisor. If at any time I see myself reporting to more than one supervisor, I raise my hand and I say, I got a problem. If I have 5 people trying to give me directions, I have a problem. I don't know what to do. I'm going to get royally confused. I go to them and I try to get that sorted out. One of you guys is going to be my commander, but not all 5 of you, right? It really eliminates conflicting orders, increases accountability. That supervisor is now responsible for everything that happens underneath them. It helps to prevent freelancing. Wonderful people who want to do good but can just get in the way. At OSO, they definitely had a problem with this because all of the people in the community wanted to help, but they weren't trained. And one of the worst things on a search and rescue thing is to become victim number 2, 3, 4, or 5, right? When I go out on a mission, the priority is my safety, my team's safety, and then I finally get around to the victim because I don't want to become another problem. And also they had a major issue with all the community trying to help, and they really had to work hard at saying, okay, you guys can go over here and help do this. Stay out of this area. It's too dangerous for you. Okay. Improved flow of reliable information. All right. Unified command. This is something that you guys will probably never have to deal with. This is the Katrina stuff where you've got lots of organizations coming in, like Red Cross and everything coming in. The idea of an earthquake in this area, right? We have an earthquake at noon. All the buildings are mucked up. You're going to have to contact all the parents. Everybody's going to be worrying about their kids. You got to let them know their kids are up. Does anybody really have that planned out? Do you actually have a number for the kids that is not in state? You've probably heard this, right? You can get out-of-state calls a lot better than in-state calls when there's an earthquake. Have you thought about going to all your parents and saying, I need a contact number out of state, so if there's an earthquake, everybody's going to call that number to make sure people are safe? Anybody ever do that? Pretty sure you haven't. Might be a good idea to even try that. Because a big earthquake, you're going to have a lot of different jurisdictions all get involved.
So would you say that one of the problems with Katrina is that they didn't have a lot of this in place, or that
Well, with Katrina, again, personal opinion. My personal opinion is FEMA went downhill before Katrina. They lost a lot of really highly skilled people. They've been gradually building it back up since then. But Katrina, FEMA just did not have the people that knew how to respond appropriately. And so it was really, really rough. Also today, there's a lot of online stuff that allows people to respond. There's tools online. You know, when Haiti happened, there were websites and things that people could post, say, yeah, I'm alive, and things like that. All right. So when do I end?
Look that up.
9:30?
I'm looking at the wrong place.
I always forget. 8:15? 9. No, 10. 10. Okay. All right. ICS organization. Again, ephemeral. That's the really key thing here. Yes?
I was just wondering, it seems to me with the chains of commands and the communication for all of that, there's a built-in overhead that's required for that. Is there kind of an idea of how much resources that consumes?
Yeah.
Because by the time you have
So-
all of that going on, you need more people in order to facilitate all that.
Exactly right. And the rule of thumb is if you have more than 7 people reporting to you, you need to add in another layer. If you have less than 3, you need to get rid of a layer of command.
Okay, so it's based on that.
It's based on that, yes.
Okay.
And again, all this stuff has been tried and tested for over 40 or 50 years. And when you're in a fire incident where life and safety is critical, if it doesn't work, they throw it out real quick. So only the stuff that survived that basically trial by fire, you might say, is what is now in this system. And you can go to most federal agencies like FEMA or the DOD. They all have their version of this. It's slightly different maybe, but it uses the same terminology and stuff, and they have all their own training materials and things. You know, if you type in ICS online, you'll see lots of different options for training materials and stuff. Okay. Confusion over titles used to be a big problem. I'm the section chief. I'm the fire chief. You know, I'm the one who should run the incident. No, I am, and stuff like that. Well, now it's ephemeral. You actually pre-plan who's going to run it. If you got 2 people, they decide, hey, you've got more experience. You run the incident. I'll be your deputy commander and take care of it, right? It can expand and contract as needed. So, for example, in the VMware incident, I was the incident commander. We started out with 1 person, from like 2 to 6, 7 or whatever in the morning. Then we grew to about 10 people really quick. I became essentially the operations chief, fixing things. My boss became the incident commander. He also fulfilled the role of PR and a few other roles. So you can fulfill multiple roles in one person. When that person gets overloaded, delegate the roles out to somebody else so the organization can grow. So for example, when I'm doing search and rescue, if I am the first person on the scene, I become the incident commander, the PR person. I fulfill every single role when I am the first person on the scene. The minute other people show up, I can start passing stuff off to them. The minute a person with more experience shows up, like an operation leader or a field leader, man, here, you take it. You know so much more than I do. You've had literally thousands of hours of more training than I have. I'm going to let you take care of that, and I'll go back to what I know how to do best. But for the first little hours or whatever, I am everything. I fulfill all the different roles to the best of my ability. And again, assignments are based on expertise, not on title. This is something that, again, in a political organization, this can be kind of hard to convince people of this. It was hard initially in the fire and police environments to convince this until people started dying, right? Then they figured out that was not a good thing. So now it's totally based on expertise. And in search and rescue, again, I've taken orders from a 17-year-old young lady because she had a lot more expertise than I did. That makes all the difference, yeah.
So, not to be joking about it, but how do you determine that, right? Somebody comes walking in, do they just list all their credentials and all their training aspects?
Well,
And how do you know that you can trust that person?
Very good. In search and rescue, we all have got basic certifications that we have to have up to date, and we know each other to some extent, right? And the operation leaders know more than anybody else. Like I have over 25 certs that I have to renew every few years. If you have two people that are butting heads a little bit, they may have to work it out. But again, if they've been trained in ICS, they understand this. And one of them backs down pretty quick. Say, oh, okay, you've done this, great. I'm going to let you do it because I can go off and do this. Because the goal is not power. The goal is to fix the incident, save people's lives, get things back up and running. And if everybody has that as a goal and they really believe it, then we don't have much of an issue with butting heads.
In an
Yeah.
environment like, let's say back at the school district where not everybody has that training and people get kind of ego engaged in some of these things, what are some strategies for helping work through that incident?
Pre-planning. So we'll talk about pre-planning documents that will say, okay, this person is the incident commander. The other thing is just education of the people. Like at North Shore, we've had one event where we had somebody come in and talk about ICS, and then it just disappeared.
Yeah.
I have no idea what happened to it. I would think it would be good to have more, but again, that's my personal belief.
Right.
But again, it's mostly education. In search and rescue, just for example, to become a team member requires about 200 to 250 hours of training. It provides two things. We all have a standard baseline of training that everybody knows, and it's kind of like a boot camp. I know that everybody else has gone through this training. I don't care who and what you are. Team leader, another 200, 300 hours of training. Operation leaders, about another 500 to 600 hours. And no, field leaders, 500 to 600. An operation leaders is literally years of training on top of that. An operation leader is responsible for everything about an operation. They run the whole lock, stock, and barrel. They can ask the state for help. They can ask the police, the fire for help. We've asked the Coast Guard for help. They have the responsibility and the knowledge on how to do that.
At that level, they're typically assigned to positions.
What?
That are, at that level, they're typically assigned to jobs or positions that are incident response based.
Actually, no, in King County they aren't.
No?
No, you work your way up from the bottom, and like I know one operations leader is the director at Microsoft. Another one he's a warehouse guy at a plumbing company. Yeah, another guy is a programmer at Microsoft. There are a few that are full-time first responders, and they work in we have a couple like that work for the county. But again, performance-based. If you put in the time and you like it, you can do it.
Whatcom County, we're really small, and
Yeah.
I'm an operations chief for Whatcom County because there's nobody in the sheriff's department that can do that, we
Right.
have an IC and that's it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So it varies by county and stuff. One thing I haven't mentioned now is the expertise also puts a top limit on what you can do. I am trained in first aid, wilderness first aid. I cannot do anything beyond that. In fact, if I do something beyond that, I'm stepping out of my bounds, I can get in really big trouble, okay? So it not only tells you what you can do, it tells you what you can't do. Okay, management by objective. This is, I'm sure you've heard of this, but basically a set of written or oral objectives. This is what we're trying to do. You get everybody on the same page. You'd be amazed at how easy it is for people to go off in different directions. One thing that I use a lot in IT, I use something called situation target proposal. I actually learned this at Boeing. Situation. When I have a new system or there's a problem or a new project come on, I write down the situation. What problem where am I at? What is my problem? I'm out of disk space. I need more compute power. Whatever it is, I write it down. I write down my target. Where do I want to be? What is my end goal? And I write down a proposal of how I get from point A to point B. You wouldn't believe how many times that I go into a manager or something and we can't even agree on the situation. If I can't agree on that, the rest of it's garbage, right? So I have to have an objective that we all agree on. We're trying to get the guy down off the mountain in one piece. We're trying to run a wonderful conference. Well, what does a wonderful conference mean? Is it a place where we're going to have talks, or we're going to focus more on talks, we're going to focus more on vendors? If you go to different conferences, you'll see how they have different focuses on what they're trying to do. So
That STP idea,
Yeah.
Steve, I know we do that at North
Yeah.
Shore. We have a lot of people who worked at Boeing at one time or another, so the terminology, I'll tell you, that is so helpful in conversations across the organization to focus, what is it we're really trying to do, and how are we gonna get it done? It's illuminating, like you're saying, how often you think you're all working on a project, and you find out we're all working on different projects.
Yep.
And that's really what's getting in our way.
yeah. So an STP is typically one page, a little paragraph for what the situation currently is. And then again, if you can't agree on that, you got to stop right there. Another little paragraph for where you want to be. And then you might have several paragraphs describing different proposals, and then the one that you end up using, right? Or you recommend. Okay. So a few things about management by objective. It puts everybody on the same page. Has to be specific, has to be measurable, right? And it has to be attainable within one operational period. Your main objective might be, I have to get this person off the mountain. Well, your first objective might be, I have to get to them because they're hanging off a cliff somewhere. Well, how am I going to do that? I've got to get all the ropes up there. I have to get the people, the proper people with the training who know how to go up and down cliffs and do high-angle rescues. I have to look at my danger. Is it a crumbly cliff, or is it a more safe cliff to climb? All kinds of things. And then I create, how am I going to actually do this? And then I figure out the tactics for each strategy. Again, small things, this is all munged into one thing. But still, make sure you say, this is what I'm doing. So if I'm an operations chief and my objective is I got to get all my machines back up after my crash, the first thing is bring up DNS, DHCP. Bring up my authentication servers. Everything else is second. Now, how am I going to do that? That's my problem. Right? Some of them I had to restore from backup. Some of them I could actually recover. All right. Overall priorities, again, being search and rescue, life safety is the absolute #1 priority of yourself. Secondary is your team members. Third is the victims or whatever else is going on, right? If you don't have them in that order, you're going to have problems. Life safety, incident stabilization. You don't want things to get worse. So the first thing you try to do is stabilize your incident. So we have the massive computer crash. The first thing I try to do is figure out what's going on, then I try to stabilize it. Preserve the data. I don't want to lose any more data. You have somebody that's hacking and then starting to delete all your data. Shut down your machines immediately. Then this is kind of interesting. If you think you're in an incident that is going to require the police get involved, get them involved early, because forensics is really fascinating and a real pain in the butt. i.e. forensics basically means that they've got to have a track record of every person and everywhere that data has been so they can take it into a courtroom if they want to prosecute. And I've been a system admin for many years and I still don't know all the little tricks because the lawyer will pick you apart. So the minute you think you're into a situation where you might have to be involved in a court case or anything, or the police get involved, get them involved early, and then they've got people who are trained in forensics on how to make sure that hard drive with the data is always being watched by somebody, and you've got a paper trail. So the guy in the courtroom can't say, well, for 15 minutes it was unwatched. Somebody modified it, so my client is not responsible for it, right? And then finally, at the end, you get down to system restoration. That's the last thing you work on. Incident action plan, it specifies the objectives, states the actions to be completed, covers an operational period. It can be written or verbal. It can be as simple as go hiking up the trail with your flashlights, find the person, and bring them back down. Or it can be really complex, like at the OSO playing, or my data center outage. It's just a way to communicate everything. For my data center outage, I basically used a whiteboard. I had a whiteboard in my office. We'd write things down on the whiteboard. So everybody, when they would complete a task, could scribble it off the whiteboard. And we would keep a list. Okay, these are the things we need to get done in this order. Whoops, erase that one. That one has to happen after this other one. Whiteboard worked great. So for that 2 or 3 day incident, the whiteboard was what we used.
So when you say written, I mean, it's, a whiteboard is okay, it's not as
Yeah.
though it has to be filed away, it's just written at that
Okay,
time.
now again, if you're doing formal things, you'll want to have something you can file away. For that, it was fine for us. Again, your group can determine what is best for what you're doing. This is flexible in that way, right? This mostly is a model for saying if you need somebody to do this role, and this role needs to have this type of stuff on it, how you do it is up to you. Yeah?
We do it on a whiteboard and then just take pictures as we go.
Mm-hmm.
That's how we document it. And keep it if we need it later.
Yep. That's a very good way of doing it. Okay. The goal, who will do what, how we're going to tell each other that we're doing things, and then what happens if something goes wrong. This is actually really a nice critical one here. Rarely in an incident do things go the way you planned them to. That's why it's called an incident. Right? Anything else you guys would put on an incident action plan? Yeah.
Maybe it comes after this, but a reflection on what happened and
The debrief.
what did we learn?
Yes.
What would we do differently?
Yes, the lessons learned. We'll talk about that. Yes, yes, the debriefing. Yes, exactly right. Very, very good.
Yeah, it would seem like gathering that while you're in instead of just doing it at the reflection moment is important. Jot those notes down in the moment that something
Yeah,
goes off.
yeah.
It's actually the hardest part of the incident management is to annotate.
Yep. Communication with each other. If you're in, let's suppose that you have a big incident at one of your schools. How are you can communicate? The phones are out. The network's out. Do you guys have some way to communicate, right? Do you have a walkie-talkie kicking around? Just for your information, Red Cross and FEMA parks in many, many of your churches will park complete little communication kits. So if there is a major earthquake, there's a good chance that your local church will have a complete Red Cross communication kit that includes a generator, radios, and all kinds of stuff in its basement somewhere. It's actually pretty fascinating.
We actually are working now to mount antennas, pre-positioned antennas for ham radio operations and what they're calling like a war kit, but there's a local action group that does that.
Yeah.
And they're positioning in our schools, so
Yeah.
where they can use large facilities for housing people.
Yep. Yep. So your schools may be doing that also. Okay. Preparedness plans. This is the part that I mentioned earlier. You can actually pre-do plans. If you have something that tends to happen a lot, you can have a pre-planned preparedness plan. So for example, I have one when I need to take down my data center. We have a series of steps we go to take it down, Then we have a series of steps to bring it back up. And I've gone through this several times, so now it's actually getting to be a relatively good plan because we've actually tested it. Yes, you need to test these things. They are no good unless you test them, right? But after you do it a few times and you've tested it, you've got something that you can use. And when we had our VMware incident, we kind of had a pretty good clue about how we needed to bring things up to have everything come up smoothly. Because we had one of these that had been relatively well tested. Disaster recovery plan, right? In search and rescue in Washington State, there's a thing called the Pratt River Drainage that has got really confusing signs in it and lots of trails, and people get lost there all the time. So we've actually written up a plan for someone gets lost in Pratt River, here's what you do. And it gives you specific things on what you're going to do and how you're going to do them and the time you're going to do them. Because it happens so often. So again, you guys have a big school, big high school, right? Hopefully you've got some sort of plan like this if something goes wrong. And then you test it. Most of the time, the kids would probably have a lot of fun with that. You can make it a fun thing for them. Police and university departments, well, I know universities do this all the time. The only reason I know the University of Washington does this all the time is because when they test it, they want to have safe people to test it on, and they come to King County Search and Rescue. We need a whole bunch of people to go be rioters and throw things at the cops. And we're the people who get to do that, and they again get to practice their preparedness plans.
You know, Steve,
Yeah.
the other ancillary benefit that I think we got from you guys having done all that testing is the confidence that it gives, like my position. Like I know at that point you guys have tested this, it's been successful, so when you tell me you're going through this, I know it's not the first time you guys have done this.
Right.
And it's something that has been successful in the past, and then I can communicate that up to people also, is we've done this before, have some confidence it's going to be okay.
That trust level is a really big portion of this. Another one, how many people know about Fred Hutch, the Cancer Research Institute? A couple people, okay. What you may not know is Fred Hutch is two aspects of it. One is they basically get all their money through very smart people who get grants. Those smart people can take that money anywhere in the world or anywhere in the U.S. So what Fred Hutch has to do is provide services that are so good, so wonderful, that they want to stay there, right? What Fred Hutch does is once a month, typically on a Friday, all the system admins get together, all the network admins get together, and they all get an IRC, and then one of them goes out and starts pulling wires to see what breaks. Hey, here's a cool wire. Boom. Nothing broke. Cool, let's go plug it back in. Pull another one. Oh crap, we just lost the router to this building. Okay, let's go figure out why that happened, and we're going to fix it so next time it doesn't happen. They've been doing this for years now. Their system is absolutely completely redundant. Everything. You can pull practically any wire, any power plug, anything. And they also found out that you need to color code things. This power plug is red, so it goes into this type of a UPS. This power plug is blue, it goes into this UPS. Everything is color coded so people don't make mistakes on how they put things together. They did that, and they spent the time doing that, because if they didn't, they wouldn't exist because their customers demand that level. Right? Another example I can give you is Google. Google has something called DIRT. Anybody ever hear of Google DIRT Week? Disaster Incident Recovery Team, DIRT, for Google. 1 week out of the year, Google has, their DIRT team goes around to all their data centers and says, I'm going to take the Oregon data center, just went offline. Well, nobody noticed. Cool. If more than 5% of their customers notice there's a problem, they put the data center back online and they figure out what went wrong. They can literally take off the West Coast, shut it down, and you will not notice. Again, they're spending a lot of money to keep that up. They practice this. They do the ICS in a really big way. Okay. And growth is needed. I've talked about that a little bit. You do want to delegate as more people show up. Then as it winds down, it shrinks down. Span and control. This is based on organizational management theory. I've definitely talked about this a lot. This is how you know when to grow your structure and know when you need to reduce it. I would definitely, if I was you, if you're in your school structure right now does not meet these requirements, you should go try to change it if possible. A lot of times you can't, but it would be a good idea to at least consider that. So in the VMware incident, I started out as the IC. I ended up being basically the operations chief that was solving the problem. I had 4 people reporting to me. We were laying everything out, we're getting things done. And then I ended up back being the IC. Resource management. What type of people do you need? Supplies and equipment. You can categorize what you got. Acquire new resources as needed. So in search and rescue, we will often have somebody, broken leg or whatever, and one of the first things we do is we get people up to them. Second thing we do is how do we get the person out? I really don't want to put them in that litter. You're talking 6, 7, 8 hours. They're not happy, I'm not happy. Helicopters are wonderful. We call King County, they can't make it. We call the Coast Guard. Sometimes we get lucky, sometimes we don't. We call the Navy, we call the Air Force. A lot of times, for us anyway, the Navy and Air Force they're doing practice missions anyway. Hey, I'm out on a practice mission. Fine, I'll swing by and pick them up. It's really pretty nice. So, acquiring your resources, getting access to the areas. During search and rescue, you notice you go up in the mountains now, they have these gates across all the forest roads. I want to go up that forest road. Our operations leader will call the sheriff, they'll get the gate open for us. Getting the resources we need to do the job. Tracking and reporting on them. And then when you're done, recovering the resources. I loaned out a bunch of radios, I want to get them back, right? So I had that 3-day exchange incident, right? I'm sitting there with another person in the office for 3 days straight. What type of resources do you think I needed? What? Food, that's right. I needed food. I had to order out for food for 3 days. What else? Caffeine, okay. That's kind of food. What else? What else do you do in 3 days?
Did you actually stay in the place for 3 days?
What?
Were you there for 3 days?
Yes, we were there for 3 days straight. There was somebody on the phone for 3 days. A bed, a cot. Yes, we had to find a cot. I had to find myself a cot for myself and the guy working for me. Anything else?
Take care of your
Breaks.
hygienic needs.
Huh?
Your
Breaks.
hygiene.
Yeah.
You
Yes.
need Someone to take over the phone while you
Yes.
go take
Yeah,
a
so
break.
there's 2 of us. So we switched off on the phone. So there's 2 of us. We switched off. Hygiene. I needed a place to go wash up a little bit, right? There was a shower at the bottom of the building, another company. I made a deal with them so we could use their shower. Okay? Resources, things that we needed, right? When you're on an incident that lasts for a long period of time, you have to think about those sorts of things. Okay. Locations and facilities. These are formal symbols that everybody understands, right? They look stupid, but if you show that symbol to a policeman, he'll know what you're talking about. So, incident command post, 1 base of operations for the incident. 1 base where everybody knows this is where it happens. This is where you go to find out more information. It might be your desk, it might be a room that you take over, a conference room you take over for a big incident, but someplace, that's where all the information is going to go to. A staging area, a temporary location for your resources. A base, you can have multiple bases where you might have a large incident, right? And then finally a place where people can relax and take a break. At OSO, they had all of these. FEMA came in and just created this whole town, literally. They had people up on the hills with their radio towers and things and instant cell towers to provide a whole cell service across the whole area. Really cool what they're able to do. You may require more facilities, such as a call center, right? Got all these, like, you have a school incident. Every parent's going to try to call that school, right? You might want to get 5 or 6 people, put them in a room with a bunch of phones to handle the call center. It can be a pre-designated site, such as your DR site, right? For example, at one of my previous careers, I was the IT director, and I moved a company to an entire new office building in 1 weekend. We shut down on Thursday, we were open on Monday. 110 people, everything. That was a planned event, I could use the ICS, but I had to worry about food. Whoops. One more. There we go. I had to worry about food. I had to worry about where I'm going to put people. I had to worry about all my various vendors that were coming in and doing things. We had to have staging areas. I had to have a base. I pretty much took care of most everything there. Communications. You can have a communications plan for a big incident, but just, hey, how are we going to communicate with each other? With each other? Are we going to use Slack or IRC or some phones, whatever? Give yourself a phone list of all the, in our department, everybody in technology, we all have each other's personal cell phones. We only use them in case of an incident. Something goes wrong, I can call somebody on the cell phone and say, I need help, right? That's decided if the incident, before it happens, and then you need to verify it actually works. People change phone numbers, right? Okay. Analysis and sharing of information about the incident. How do you collect, share, and manage it? Do we need to worry about forensics? Constantly update the people with the latest reports. Write down little notes for the debriefing afterwards. After every incident, we hold a debriefing. Either I do it within my team at work, or if I'm on search and rescue, we stand around and people pull out their little books and say, hey, this thing worked. This did not work. We need to figure out a better way of doing this. We had a problem here.
We ran into a situation with a bomb threat, and we did an elementary. And what we found on this aspect was Facebook and other social media is significantly faster
Yeah.
than we were prepared for. We had parents coming up collecting their students before we had any management at the collection site, and you're like, how do you tell a parent? You gotta wait, you can't take the kid off the bus.
Yeah. Yeah. We need to be able to mark that kid's gone so we know.
Yeah, somebody has to be accountable for it.
So one of the things that we do, so let's suppose I'm on search and rescue mission. Let me see if I've got it here. I think I have it, yeah. Every search and rescue person in King County has 2 cards. So when I show up at the command post, I give 1 card to the incident commander and I keep 1 with me. And then when everybody leaves, the incident commander should not have any cards left. If he has a card left, we have a problem. There's either somebody still out there or somebody didn't pick it up like they were supposed to. And then they get a little phone call. But that's a really simple way just to verify that, oh, everybody showed up. We have a thing that says they showed up, and everybody left. Cool, I'm good. So it doesn't have to be fancy electronic stuff. It can be just really simple processes that make this thing work. Okay, accountability. This is where everybody has to agree to follow some basic standards and principles on how you're going to do things. So in search and rescue, if you don't follow the basic standards and principles and you don't keep yourself certified, you don't go on missions. In King County, it's because the minute I leave my home to go on a mission, I'm covered by King County insurance. I crack up my car, anything happens, they pay for it until I get back. And the insurance company says, great, we'll do that as long as everybody is fully certified and agrees to follow everything. If somebody doesn't, you have to kick them out. It's a pretty good deal. I get totally covered by insurance and everything. I don't have to worry about anything. Something happens to me, I get a free trip to the hospital. They pay for everything. They get all that free labor, so they get a good deal out of it too. Deployment. It's a systematic process that reduces the chaos. Everybody's showing up. I want to help out. Right? We have to have some process that says, okay, you guys can do this, you guys can do this. Or like you were saying, a systematic process to get the kids back into the parents' hands. Right? You can't just have chaos there. So when I show up, I wait until I called for. First thing I show up, I check in, and I'll get some assignment. They may just say, go stand in the parking lot for a while until they have an assignment for me. And I do what they tell me to. Then when I get the assignment, I make sure I understand it. I repeat it back to them. Okay, I know what I'm supposed to do. I grab my team, I explain it to them, and off we go. Same thing with the VMware thing. People started showing up in the morning. I said, okay, here's what I want you to do. You need to deal with this problem, or this, this aspect of the problem. Let me know when you're done. Boom, we mark it off on our little whiteboard. Also, you need to tell people where the facilities are. Some sort of way to identify people. We have badges here. He's got a different color badge. I can identify board members, right? On purpose, a way to identify people. If you have a big incident at a school, you're probably going to grab some badges, make it really easy. In search and rescue, we have different colored vests. Blue means incident staff that sit back at the staff. Yellow is the guys that go out and do the traffic control. And I can look at the vest and I go, oh, that's a person that does that role. If I have a question for that type of a role, I can go ask them. Right? Here, we have badges. Okay. I'm not going to make you go through all this. However, do you know that one right there? You remember that? Okay. Unity of command is up and down, or back from the bottom going up. Unified command is when you have a whole bunch of different organizations coming together. You know, FEMA, Red Cross, everybody trying to make sure everything works right. Okay. Where we got half an hour. Okay, we'll go through this part relatively quickly. So this is the structure. Everything in ICS is based on this structure. That's not too hard, is it? What do you got? Eight boxes, right? You have an incident command. This is all the stuff up in here. And then you have various sections underneath it. All right? So incident commander, these are the names that people use. So if you go talk to a fire chief, that would be that person. A branch director. You notice that the IC does not have a name like this to it. The IC is whoever is there that can do it. It might be the fire chief, it might be a director, it might be a supervisor, right? Whoever has the most experience. Okay. A section chief may have multiple deputies. These should be as proficient as the section chief in doing it. A lot of times we'll have an operations leader and they'll have deputies working for them that are all operation leaders, right? A lot of times I'll go out on a mission, I'm a team leader, I'll get a team of 5 people. There'll be another team leader in my team. Great. You're the person that's going to handle the radio stuff. I'll just do the leadership roles, you take care of the radio. I'll have an EMT on my team. Great. You deal with any medical things that we run into. I'm delegating, right? Okay. You got your formal. This is what I was talking about before. Up and down the hierarchy. You got your informal type of communication. Formal is used for requests. I need something. Oh, here's something that everybody should know. So we're going to talk about ICS functions, incident commander, safety officer, public information, liaison with other groups. The IC is responsible for all operations, totally responsible. It is the only position that is always staffed. The first person on an incident, that's the IC, right? And they have to remain there at all times until they delegate or they transfer authority to somebody else. If you're a first responder and you come in across a car wreck, you can drive by legally. If you stop, you have to stay there until somebody comes and relieves you of your duties, or else you can get hauled into court. The minute you start to help somebody, if you do not stay until somebody else takes over, you are legally liable. If you don't stop, that's perfectly fine. That's a good Samaritan law, right? Okay, first person on the scene stays until you can transfer the control, and fills every other role until you can delegate them, give them off to somebody else. Basically, he does whatever the incident commander tells him to. So, how big is my incident? What's my problem? That's what I did between 2 and 6 in the morning with the VMware incident, right? If I have any pre-made plans, you implement them. If I don't, I try to create something. Then as the incident continues to happen, I monitor it. How am I getting, are things getting fixed? What's getting fixed? What problems am I running into? I reassign personnel. I got more people showing up all the time. Great, here, you can do this. You can take care of that. I report as needed to the higher ups. Hey, we now have authentication up and working. People can log into their stations. Now we got Synergy, will be up in 2 hours. Great. Now Synergy's up and working, our student record system. Now this system, now the payroll system's up, and so on and so forth, right? I'm constantly revising my plans to reflect reality. Oh, I thought I could get this one up, but oh, we're going to have to come up off of backups. That means I'm going to have the database person involved, because I can bring the backup up, but he needs to get it into the database and things like that. Authorized release of information. Who am I going to tell to do what? As an incident commander, I'm the one that authorizes the formal release of information out. And make sure people take breaks. In an incident, adrenaline's going like crazy. You want to go and do things. You want to fix things. Take a break. Slow down a little bit. You have to make sure people do that. And then when you close down, you start shutting down all the sections. Hey, I don't need you here anymore. You can go home. Check them off. You get approval from the higher-ups to totally deactivate everything. I talked to my boss and said, okay, by Saturday night, I think we're all done. We've got all the critical systems up. We can push everything else off to Monday morning. He said, fine. He could have said, nope, I have to have those things up. That means I got to work the whole weekend. That was his decision. Ensure that everything's returned, and finally do the debrief of everybody who's been there. So for every King County search and rescue incident, we do the debrief right on the site, and then everybody goes home. Somebody writes up that whole thing, typically the operations leader, and then sends it out to the entire group. The people who didn't attend then can learn from those debriefs. So these are all these other groups here. I'll go through them really quick. So whenever anybody shows up, you have to sign in. You get the situational briefing, what's happening. You get a position identifier, a hat, vest, or tag or something. You start a log of your position. You start taking notes. What's happened? When you close out, you give the logs to whoever's doing all the documentation. They can look through them and say, oh, there's something I didn't know about. I need to add that to the debrief documentation, right? You return everything that you borrowed. And then you make sure you sign out so they know that you're actually gone. And you, in my case, I pick up my little badge. The briefings, you have to do this. You can do them on staff, field, or section level. Every operational period, whenever you start, what are we going to accomplish during this period? What type of things do we want to get done? This is just a whole bunch of information about what you should have in a briefing. In all your briefings, you should always end with, hey, does anybody have any questions? Is there something I left out? Do you not understand exactly what people are supposed to do? A lot of times I will have my team members repeat back to me, this is what we're going to do. Yep, we're all on the same page. But human language is great for getting people confused, especially English. Safety officer ensures everything is safe. Most IT incidents, you don't have a problem with this, right? We're working in a nice computer room. However, on this one, we did have a problem. New York got hit by a hurricane, right? Everything shut down. ISP on the 18th floor of a building. They had a generator. It had 3 days of fuel in it. Well, it was shut down for a whole week. ISP, they have to keep everything up. So they bought 50-gallon drums of fuel, 5-gallon buckets. I'm not sure this is really the safest way to carry diesel fuel up 18 flights of stairs. They probably should have had a safety officer here involved, but they did it. They kept it going. Right? Not very common in our environment, but it could happen. So you should have somebody, and by appointing somebody as a safety officer, all of a sudden they can ignore everything else and they can look at everything going on and say, yeah, everything's safe, or no, let's do this thing a little bit differently. Because people aren't thinking about safety when they're thinking about, I got to get this up and running. I have to solve this problem, right? That's why you need to have somebody that's separate as a safety officer sit there and say, look at everything, and then also kind of remind people before you send them out in the field, hey, be cautious. Don't sit there and try and lift that 100-pound item or whatever, all right? Okay, public information officers, they're the one that give out the information to the public, to your parents or whatever. You definitely want to filter that a little bit. They're going to hear all kinds of information. If you start feeding out some bad information, it makes things a lot worse. Search and rescue incidences, you'll read one thing in the paper, almost invariably that's not the entire story. They're not lying to you, but they're not telling you the entire story. Very rarely do they tell you the entire story.
One of the pieces we struggle with on this, and this is texting, email, other, is people taking pieces of information and moving that along and not having the full context. So you'll see information come back to you. As soon as you see it, you know where it originated from, but it doesn't look like anything that you actually sent out. You know, it just becomes heard.
Yeah. So a public information officer is really good about framing the information so that it's hard to take out of context. I mean, I have a lot of respect for the public information officer for the King County Sheriff's Department. They're really good at understanding, and they have a good relationship with the press on, okay, I'm going to give you some information so you guys can do your stories, and then you agree not to cross over the line. Again, the IC has to approve the release of the information. You really want that there. You might have to set up a news center. If you have a outage at a school, I'm sure you're going to have everybody, news, are going to show up, right? Especially if it's a slow day. They are going to show up and they're going to want stuff. You need to have somebody ready to meet with them. If you get a big outage, we had one several years ago where it was a really hot day in the spring after a miserable cold weather, and everybody went out to the Green River to go floating down the river, and we had, I don't know, 10 or 12 people we had to rescue, and 2 people died. So we had, all the news people were out there, and the police were out there trying to keep them away from us where we could do our job. But it was a really big thing in Seattle. You can have the formal statements, right? Update the community, let the parents know what's going on. If they feel like they're getting information from you, they're more likely not to spread rumors, right? You know, use your Facebook pages, use your social thing. Hey, this is what's happening. This is when we're going to do the next release. Don't just leave them hanging. Say, hey, yeah, we'll have another one in 4 hours where we have more information. Some of the things you need to put in there, the scope and size. How big is the incident? How many people are involved? What are we doing about it? What resources do we have involved? What do we think our time to recover is, if we happen to know that? What caused the problem? And then reassurance. Let people know that things are going to be okay. We're working it. If people get some comfort level with you that things are going to be okay, they aren't going to go wandering around trying to find out what's really going on. Liaison officer is when you got to go talk to other groups. School outage, you're probably going to be talking, you know, if you have school lockdown, you're going to be talking with the police, right? You might be talking to a PTA group. You can get your PTA to send something out. Okay. I'm going to skip these exercises. So now we're going to go down to operations. Operations is the one that actually does all the work. So in my case, we're the ones that brought the systems back up and running. If you're in a school lockdown, it's going to be your school staff that are going to verify doors are locked or whatever, right? It's typically the first section that's activated after the command group. So your IC may be one person that does all those roles we just talked about. Next thing will be the operations section. I mean, you gotta have somebody actually start doing the work. It often develops from the bottom up. People start showing up and say, great, here, go off and start working on this. I can work on this aspect of it. It's the largest and most immediate thing that happens. It's the group that's going to grow the fastest. So, difference between a task force and a strike team. A task force is mixed resources with a single leader. So you might have database people, system admins, network people, all together with a single person, and we got to solve this problem. That's a task force. A strike team, on the other hand, is all similar resources, all system admins, all your network guys working together. Again, these are definitions that they're going to use. So a task force might be all fire people. I mean, a strike team might be a bunch of fire people. A task force might be fire people, Red Cross, police people.
So in your example of the VMware incident that
Yeah.
you were the incident commander.
Initially,
You were
yeah.
the first one there, but you have the knowledge to be in operations at the same time.
Yeah, so when I started out, I did everything. And then as soon as my boss came in, I was able to say, you be the incident commander. I can focus on operations. That's a better use of my skill set, right? So then I did that totally. And we basically had a essentially a task force because I had to call up some database people to help me out, even though I'm a system admin group. I had a bunch of system admins. We called in some database people to verify things and check things out, and lots of other people. Yeah. And then when things demobilized, and people went home, and on Saturday, I became the incident commander again, and I kind of wrote up everything. As incident commander, I had to write up a debrief document and everything, and sent to my boss. This is what happened. This is why it happened. This is what we did. This is how we responded.
So in operations, you were the leader of the operations group. If you get more than 5 underneath you in that, you would have a co-leader in operations that would have another
Yeah.
5?
Yeah, we would, well, more than 7. Five is ideal. And my team was about 5 or 6 people reporting to me at that time. So I never had to grow any bigger. Yep. We have these things called groups and divisions for when you get up to really large things. You can skip that. So assigns duties and briefs to staff, gets the equipment and supplies. I'm responsible for getting things for people to make sure they're taken care of. I'm responsible for implementing whatever the incident action plan says I'm supposed to do during this operational period, right? I tell the planning chief of what I'm doing, because on a big event, you'll have somebody doing planning for the next operational period. So like maybe this operational period, I'm going to get my authentication servers back up and running. Somebody else is already planning for, okay, once we get those things up and running, what do we do next? Database servers perhaps, right? I already got somebody planning on which ones to bring up in which order and stuff, ideally. In this case, it was one person. But the role is there. I'm guessing for this conference, you guys have several of these aspects going on. I ensure that we're following standard procedures. Again, people get excited. They want to get things done, and they will try to take shortcuts, and sometimes that can cause problems. And finally, I make sure that people are taking care of themselves. You've been out there for 5 hours. Go take a walk, take a break, get 5 minutes, get out of here for a little bit. Because people work for a long period of time, they're going to start making mistakes, and that makes things worse. Okay, we'll skip over that. Okay, planning. Collection, evaluation, documentation, tracking resource assignments, making sure that resources aren't being overused. At the start, they're very busy, then they slow down, and at the end they get really busy, typically. So in search and rescue, we basically got a whole division of search and there's 8 divisions of search and rescue in King County. We have a whole division that's related to the planning and documentation and stuff like that. So on every mission, they kind of show up at base camp, and then they just do all this wonderful stuff so nobody else has to. I have a lot of respect for those folks.
In the IT world, do you have different documentation forms?
You could. We'll mention the forms at the end here. You can use the same ones. I typically use the STP a lot, and then my incident action plan is just something I write on a whiteboard. I don't do anything fancy because my incidences are relatively small, on the order of a few days and, 10 people maybe. Timekeeping and expense. You want to keep track of that if you're having to pay people overtime, right? To come in and help out. Situation assessments and summaries. And then they try to anticipate problems before they occur. This is the big role of this. If this happens, what can go wrong? I'm carrying all this stuff, the 5-gallon buckets. What happens if one of them spills? I'm pretty sure those guys didn't think about that. But what's going to happen? What we may want to buy, and it's by anticipate. It's not only anticipate. Well, what can I do to mitigate that risk? Well, if I spill a bucket of diesel fuel, it'd be nice to have a big thing of cat litter around to soak it up. That's something that, hey, I'm going to go out and buy this stuff anyway. Go swing by a bunch of cat litter just in case, right? Somebody who can consider that type of stuff. Resources, check in, who's doing what and where. Okay, the kind of resource, system admin, storage admin, and then they're capable. Senior system admin versus a junior system admin. They can't all do the same job, so you have to allocate the jobs to the right person, right? And then finally, send everybody home in some sort of orderly manner. Okay. Logistics. responsible for providing all the facilities, everything that has to happen so I can do my job. I basically want to have a whole nother group that says, whenever I want something, it's there for me already, ideally, right? Food services, transportation, communication, and planning. So if you have a school, if you have an earthquake, this is a group that you're definitely going to want to think about. Do some pre-planning here. What if I have an earthquake, what are we going to do? How are we going to deal with it? Medical, food. Do you have a medical staff? Do you have people on staff identified? In my administration building at North Shore, I'm identified as one of the people who can do the first responder and handle the IEDs and stuff like that. Medical are probably not needed for things. Definitely need food. Some sort of communication tools. Some way to keep logs. IRC or Slack is great because you get this automatic log of everything that's happening, right? And you can go back through it. You don't have to write it down. Rest areas. We've talked about that. Ground support. You may need transportation. Let's suppose you have a school district, but a lot of your stuff is over in a data center that's 10 miles away. Earthquake, how are you going to get over there? Some sort of transportation mechanism. Okay. Finance, again, we have to have some way to track all the costs with the incident. It's really important that you can go back to somebody and say, this is what it cost. Maybe we should try to prevent it. So for example, I work for a small software development firm. It was public. In a small software development firm that is public, they make all their money on the last day of a quarter or on the last couple days of a year, literally. Everybody waits. If you go to Dell, for example, Dell is wonderful. If you want a good deal, wait until the end of their quarter. You can get 20 or 30% off anything, right? So we're on the last day of the quarter, the second to the last day of the quarter. We're trying to push out a new product. We've already told all the investors that this product will come out this quarter, we're going to ship it this quarter, et cetera, et cetera. The machine that was doing all the QA had a hard disk failure. Everything was lost. The product could not be shipped that quarter. Our stock price tanked. Our CEO looked like crap in front of the investors. It was a disaster. We got backups for every single machine and every single person. He spent the 50 grand after the horse had already left the barn. But he took care of it. So that's an example of you want to think about financial tracking. That cost us a fortune. I was able to say, hey, let's go spend some money so it doesn't happen again. So you need to have the financial tracking. Timekeeping. How much is involved in search and rescue? You can go online to our King County website, if you remember, and you can see that, oh man, we put in tens of thousands of hours to the county. And the county can point to that and say, yes, it is worthwhile to pay these, to have these guys, to pay for insurance for these guys, because we get all this, we get this benefit from it, because we keep track of all that.
The other timekeeping pieces for insurance claims that we have districts, things happen,
Mm-hmm.
people get all excited about fixing the problem right then, nobody tracks their time. A month later, the insurance claim we want to file, and nobody remembers anymore what they did, how long they did it.
Right.
So we end up not making the claim because we don't have to do it.
Yep. Yeah. And it's also neat. I'm needed for compensation for injury or losing stuff. So procurement, vendor contracts. We talked about a lot of this. Cost estimates. Unified command. This is where you might have people from whole different groups. So system admin, storage, law enforcement. Let's suppose I had somebody break in and start deleting stuff all over my servers. That might be something that would happen. These are all, as you can see, forms that you can download offline that people use. And most of these forms are really simple. They'll have like a date and a person name and a little bit of help text on this is what you need to put into this area. So you can use these, you can modify them for your situation. Or, you got organizational charts, check-in list, unit logs. But these are the same ones. And the cool thing about this is every police department, every fire department, every first responder group, Homeland Security, they use the same set. So you're all talking the same language. And in fact, if you go to other countries, they use the same concepts. Okay, we've got about 10 minutes left. I'm going to take a real brief sideline into leadership. Because if you don't have good leadership and you don't have that trust, none of this other stuff is going to work. Anything we've talked about doesn't work without that leadership and that trust. So leadership means able to communicate very specific instructions and ask for feedback. What am I forgetting? What haven't I covered? Where am I leaving you confused? Did it work? Being honest with yourself. This worked, this didn't work. I blew this. Taking responsibility for when you do blow it. And again, it's going to take a level of trust to get that. So my manager hired me in 2003. I don't think we actually really trusted each other until 5 or 6 years later. I had to prove to him that yes, I actually did follow through on my actions and stuff like this. I'm this new guy. And it took a while. Now, after 13 or 14 years, we have a really high level of trust. And if I say something's important, he pays attention to it because he knows that the only time I ever bring that up is if it's really important. Within your scope of authority, don't do things outside of your scope of authority. You're a leader over one little area, but don't do something that you haven't been trained for. Respect. Make sure that people underneath you get opportunities to do things. So when I go on a team leader, I'm always looking for ways to delegate tasks to other people. You're a new person. Have you ever worked the radio? Great. Here, work the radio. I know you've had training in it, but try it out on a mission. Try it out. Practice. When you start to do that with people working underneath you, they start to want to work more for you. They'll do more for you if they feel like they're being given new opportunities to grow and try different things. Let them know what's going on, and definitely get them to feel that you're watching out for them. You're covering their back. Always look to improve yourself. I give these talks, right? I give probably 4 or 5 talks a year. It's a way that I get to learn the information a little bit better, and then I also learn from you guys when you tell me things about your incidences, your events. Let people know what's going on. After the debrief is really, really important. You debrief them, give them an opportunity in a safe environment. They can say, man, you really screwed up. And if they have a good reason and they say, yep, I did blow that. I will not do that again. That's really hard for a leader to do, but that's what leadership is all about. Being able to say, I screwed up, being able to take constructive criticism from the people underneath you. Let people know when they talk to you. Acknowledge them. Don't just have the sound go in one ear and out the other. Repeat back what they said so that they feel like they were actually heard. Sometimes people just want to be heard. This is that emotional thing I was talking about at the beginning. Somebody's really emotional, really excited. They just want to be heard. They don't want you to do anything. They don't want you to take any action. They just want to vent. Let them vent. After they've got it all out of their system, then you can say, great. I understand that you're really concerned about this. What can we do to make sure it doesn't happen again? Or whatever. But give them that opportunity. Definitely ask if they're concerned about something. I went on one mission. We had a leader that took us up, and he was in the mountain rescue, which tends to do a lot of vertical stuff. I'm not. I don't do vertical stuff. And it was dark, and we have the little headlamps on, so we can't see anything. And we end up on this trail, and we got kind of lying. I'm like looking down, and that's pretty steep on both sides. And I yelled, hey, what is this place? He says it's a class 4, I don't know, class something climbing trail. And I said, what does that mean? He says, if you fall, you die. I said, stop. That's not what I signed up for. I don't have this training. I don't want to be here. This is not me. So him and another mountain guy went on. The rest of us kind of gently backed down the trail. It was way beyond my skill set. He should have asked me, hey, folks, are you comfortable with this? He didn't. And that came up in the debriefing at the end of the mission. When you have people of different skill levels, the guys that at the higher skill levels got to make sure the whole team is comfortable with where they're going. Corrective action reports. Formal reports to say, this is what went wrong, this is what we're going to do to fix it. Sometimes it can just be a verbal thing, like with my boss on the VMware incident. Great, I'm now going to check all my jumbo frame sizing and make sure I never have that problem happen again. And whenever I put in a new SAN, that's a big hot button for me. And sometimes I have TAs that work for me, and I will say, great, you guys got to go check this just to make sure it hasn't slipped a digit or something happened and it changed. Because there's no warning on this one. The only way is to actually look at the data and see. Okay. Whoops. We'll skip the quiz. FEMA courses. These are the basic courses. You can move up if you want to. Training at FEMA. Really good courses. They basically take you through all of this. What you guys have gotten in the last 90 minutes or so is basically a 2-day course. So it's really condensed. But they actually go through, these are kind of the basic ones, but when you go through the training, they go through everything in excruciating detail. And then they have quizzes that said, did you really understand what you just read and went through all this? So if you're not a first responder, you may not want to do that. But it is, again, use it as a model, as something that you can say, I'm running this event, I'm doing this, do I have all of these 14 categories filled out? If I don't, let's go make sure somebody is assigned to that category. Do I have that person that's worried about safety? Do I have that person that's worried about PR? And then go ahead and work with your people to say, okay, realize incident commander is not the director all the time. They might be better in some other role. It's an ephemeral organization. It just appears and then disappears when it's done, like at this event. That's all I got. Questions? We've got a few minutes for questions, I think. Yeah?
How do we get the slides?
I don't know. Are we posting them around here?
If you shoot them to me or to JD, then we're going to post it up on the website.
Okay. I'll make sure that happens today. Yeah. Question?
Oh, I was gonna ask the same thing, but
Okay.
I'm also curious, when you deal with people who don't understand ICS, don't understand the importance of it, how do you convey to them, the importance of being prepared for these kind of events, preparation?
That can get to be really hard because until somebody gets burned, they don't really understand things, right? You know, a little kid touching the stove, you can tell them, don't touch, don't touch, don't touch. Until they touch, they don't really understand it. My manager at that one company, I kept telling him we need to do backups. Until that quarterly disaster happened, he didn't understand what it meant, right? You can try to do it in terms of like saying, if you don't do this, here are the risks that you are accepting. So that's what I do with my management. I will lay out saying, in a situation target proposal, here's what it is. If you don't do this, here's the risk that you are accepting, and I will try to give them some idea of what that is. So for example, I had another software firm I worked to, back when email and internet was just becoming large. We had an Exchange server. Viruses were just starting to hit. I went to my manager and say, if we're going to put in Exchange, if you want to run your own email, I'm going to want to spend more money on antivirus software than I will on the Exchange server, because if we don't, we're going to have lots of problems. He hemmed and hawed, but we had built up enough of a trust relationship that he said, oh, okay. So I bought my Exchange server. I spent about 1.5 times more on antivirus systems, and I got a really nice dinner out of Canlis, because about a year later, he was down at some conference for entrepreneurs. Everybody was shut down. Big virus attack, malware attack had hit. We were not, because I had spent so much money on that. And he came back and he said, hey, you made me look so good that I'm going to take you out, because I was the only guy down there that everything was working great. Everybody else was totally shut down. It takes trust. It takes a way of and even at that, I told him that we will probably go down once or twice a year, even by spending this amount of money. We will go down probably once or twice a year. Another example, at my current job, about 2 years ago, I went to my management and said, I can't maintain what we got. There's one of me, and there's not, we're putting in new systems way too fast. We will have major outages. They have accepted that as, sorry, we're just going to live with that. Yeah, but the thing is, They know that now as a risk. They've talked to their management, and you can verify this, and they've accepted this is something we're going to have to live with, but thank you for warning me. Now I know when that outage happens, I'm not going to get really upset because you've warned me about it, right? So
That's gonna work.
it's worked. My manager's, my director's right here.
It actually has worked. I mean, we added we added 2 positions within your larger group, and part of it was a result of those conversations of saying, here's what's gonna happen. People get tired, people go on vacation, people get sick, things happen. We have, in too many places, one level, right? I mean,
Well, and
JV
we just have way too many systems to maintain with our
we
current
just have
staff.
way too much, so it hasn't solved it, but by communicating the risk that people were accepting repeatedly and getting burned a couple of times, slowly, a little bit has been released. We're not where
Yeah.
we need to be, but sometimes it's just a really long process to convince people what you need. Hopefully the risk you're accepting isn't too bad, you don't get burned too hard. Ski talked about the fact that we don't have an ICS plan in place across the whole district for incidents outside of technology, which is kind of remarkable when you think about what we have, what's our big commodity, right, kids? And there's really, as far as I can tell, there's no really great plan. It's like every time something happens, it feels a little bit like they're making it up as it occurs. And I'm afraid in too many districts, that's kind of where you probably live also. You've got a communications director probably, and maybe you've got a security officer, and the thought is just, well, they'll take care of it, but there's really no organized plan for the whole thing.
Yeah. We actually did have somebody come in and talk to admins about that, and then I'm not sure what happened to it. Yeah, question?
Parlay to the conversation, do you guys have documentation for your department in the ICS sort of format? So like the prepared plans, you have scenarios already kind of written out?
Yeah, so for example, on our wiki, we have scenarios for, shutting things down, things crash, things like that. Just in my group. I'm not too sure about the other groups. So I've got pretty good scenarios like that. Now, can you think of one bad thing about having that in your wiki?
Your data system goes down and it wins.
Yeah. That was one of the things we got burned with once. So now every month we make a copy of our wiki onto all of our local laptops. Because we got burned once. Exactly right. But getting back to your question, it's trust. It's explaining to them to the risk. Even if they don't want to hear it, you can at least tell them. And if you tell them and something goes wrong, they're going to say, hey, this kid told me that this was going to happen, and by George, it happened. I maybe want to listen to him when he says something, right? The other thing that I will go through is I'll go through, this has been around for a long time. It's been around for 40 years. It's been tried and tested. So those are the 2 ways that I try to explain it. And a lot of times, it won't go anywhere, right?
I guess the real trick is to invest in that ounce of prevention is what's on here.
Yeah. And again, that usually happens when they get burned. Okay. Yeah.
I've been trying to, try to overlay an ICS for incidences in our department.
Mm-hmm.
It's hard when people have never worked in an emergency response field. My frustration in trying to get this is everybody does their own thing. How do you get people who are not emergency responders to understand the importance of using some sort of a structure like that?
Again, it comes down to trust. I don't know how to say it any other way. If people trust and believe in you, and like I say, it took me over 5 years before my manager and I really started to trust each other, then they'll start to listen to you. And if they get burned, then they'll start to listen to you.
That we have the issues with.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And that is a lot of leadership. If the director of your department says, hey, this is really important to me, and I want you to do these things, they're more likely to be involved in it, right? If the director doesn't really care one way or the other, you're pushing really hard upstream.
Yeah. We have a great director. Just, it's that, I don't think that is the issue, but too many things on the plate to be able to say, do this. But I think I'm going to put something together and run it. I'm just going to ask if I can run it past you, my outline.
Sure.
And then if the director says yes, this is good, then we can just go with it instead of having him trying to say this is.
And so where are you from?
Huh?
And where are you from?
Bellingham School District,
Okay, cool.
so. Kurt-
Yeah.
Kurt Gutzel is my director.
Yeah. I mean, if you want me to come up and talk, I'll definitely give them a piece of my mind. I don't care. I do this a lot. Anyway, thank you guys.
Okay, if you guys wanna talk, I gotta go upstairs and introduce another thing.
Okay.
Ski.
I think I gotta get out of here too. Oh.